Good morning. Thank you for joining me, Sangha, and my wonderful co-host, Morten. It's our 5th episode today, and we have the charismatic Neil Eastwood with us.
Even underestimating it, we have the guru, Neil Eastwood, with us today. To kick it off, Neil, what is the sinister truth about workforce situation in this sector today? Give it to us.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, as you know, I'm a student of what happens in workforce, have been for a long time. And it's kind of, there's always, they say like, there's, you can't go lower than we have just been, but there's definitely a basement, and we're in that now. So I think the real pressures when we're talking right now are around the cost of living increases. And I was just before we came on this looking at the fuel prices like reaching record highs again, and they're likely to go up tomorrow. So obviously that's really hitting home care, which is already under a significant stress. So there's that, and we, from a labour market perspective, many more people are economically inactive now. There's more vacancies than there are people looking for work. So it's quite puzzling. We've lost a lot of people, and I think some of that is to do with the effects of COVID and long-term mental and physical illnesses. But people are rethinking the way they work, and that's affecting people over 50 like me that seem to be, disappearing somewhere. And then the under 25s are looking for more of a portfolio career. So it's harder for us to get them in, particularly in the care home setting, for shifts that we're expecting. So yeah, it's really difficult at the moment to, with immigration as well. Of course, we relied heavily on migrant labour, and that's not been easy for to use the visa system. Providers are finding that hard. So I really feel for them. It is sinister. It's really hard now, and as you struggle with recruitment, that puts pressure on retention. Then you from a provider's perspective, you don't know where to look. So yeah, not wishing to start on a downer, but it is hard work. There are opportunities. Hopefully we can touch on some of those as we go through. But yes, it's you have to be on your game now.
Absolutely. And like you say, there are opportunities, and we will be touching base on them. But it's better to be realistic as well. I have one question. That is, what made you start Care Friends? And I know your system pretty well, having worked with a couple of my client care providers who rave about your product. But good to understand that journey, and get a little bit more insights from there.
Yeah, it's quite maybe it's typical. It doesn't feel like it to me how Care Friends came about. So I had been studying recruitment and retention best practice from other countries around the world. So I traveled around the world and talked to other providers and tried to find things that they were doing that we weren't doing here. But there was a theme coming out amongst many things, that employee referrals were always the best source. And there was frustration about the number that were coming from that source, but there was no doubt at all about the quality and the tenure of these people. And then I found a piece of research back in the 1980s, a dusty part of a library, that looked at recruitment in that period, and before internet job boards, and before local newspaper classified ads, and it was employee referral was like 80% of recruitment back then was word of mouth for friends and family. That's how you did it. And so that made me think, could we get more out of that process? Because it felt really paper-based and clunky and inefficient. So I wasn't trying to invent something new. I thought, we've got the bedrock here of something great. Can we use technology to remove the friction from every part of that process? So, and back in the 90s, before you were born, Sangha, I was MD of a business in Singapore, and we were operating the back office for frequent flyer programs for Asia. And we were dealing with the points and whatever, and we deal with the customers complaining that one point was missing from their account. And it made me realize back then, like, people's behavior can be changed by small amounts of points. And so that's the thinking I put into care friends as well. And then Skills for Care kindly partnered, and we went on our, the painful journey of piloting and washing our dirty laundry in public.
That sounds very familiar. And you say 80% were back then in your first study you're referring to were
Yeah,
from families, friends, people that were working. Yeah.
yeah, over 80, over 80. I mean, that's the way you did it. And I found a piece of research that said that the Roman army was recruited that way too, that they actually ran an employee referral scheme, but I haven't found any more evidence of it. But it would be perfectly plausible, because it's who you know. And I think particularly in the care sector, the employee referrals work in any sector, but particularly in the care sector where we're trying to recruit people with invisible values that aren't on a CV, then the people that know who have those values are our 1.5 million workforce. And so it just makes total sense to try and activate as many of them as recruiters as we can. Obviously, simple to say and harder to do, but that's the concept.
Absolutely, and it's win-win, isn't it? As well as for the employees, because employees won't refer if they are not liking the job they are in, as well as the company, and likewise, so I think that is the future going forward. But tell us more. Where when you washed your dirty laundries, like you say,
Yeah.
um, what has been the learning? How has the journey been? What do you see the sector's openness over the years, and specifically with COVID?
Well, we made a number of mistakes, and we continue to do so. One mistake I made was so we have an app that's in the hands of the care worker, and we have a portal that's operated by the recruiter and the manager. So there are two interfaces to the system. And I was obsessed about the care workers loving the app, finding it simple to use. We spent a lot of time and money with them creating a user interface that was appealing. And I think we did a really good job of that with their help. I completely forgot that the system doesn't work very well if the recruiter can't be bothered or gets confused by how to operate their side of the system. And so care workers can generate referrals which appear on the portal, and if the recruiter doesn't do anything with them or isn't aware that they exist, then the whole system falls apart. Equally, if a care worker cashes in points, makes a request on the app that they want to cash in the points for money into their payroll, and then no one notices that or does anything about it, the system falls over again. So it's realizing that these are a group of stakeholders and it has to work for everybody, I think, is one of the big learnings. We launched in the middle of COVID. Well, I don't know if that is, I think we can still say that. So 2 years ago, pretty much 2 years ago today, we launched. And so we were a COVID baby, and we had to deal with the challenges there. I think while we launched, an acceleration of tech had happened, which is a positive thing, I think, for all kind of anyone who's watching this podcast hoping to do a similar thing. But what it also did, I noticed, is many other providers of tech in other sectors said, hang on a minute, no one else is buying. Oh, wait a minute, those guys in social care have still got the lights on. And so you end up with everybody piling in, trying to sell tech, and you end up in a queue of tech in a traffic jam. So I think that particularly for COVID, it's been a positive and a negative. And almost for us, given that we are addressing the workforce crisis, which is the biggest challenge, even now people are in such a reactive mode because things are in such crisis. They don't have the capacity sometimes to plan and launch something. And that has been an interesting thing as well. I mean, I use the analogy they're too busy chasing chickens to fix the fence. And I think that is kind of where we are a bit.
Yeah, and I endorse that view, and that's where many of the care providers comes to us and say, we have brought in this piece of technology during the COVID time, and now we don't know what to do with it, because we were not sure how we went about with the procurement. We didn't know whether that fitted us perfectly, because like you say, there has been a plethora of tech sellers into social care all of a sudden, and then suddenly that vetting process has gone.
I think the sector in general, when it comes to sort of the buying behavior, has matured quite a lot. Also, why you're referring to an implementation queue, because the sector is really picking up on a lot of the admin, a lot of the back office stuff. some of the apps that makes care delivery even easier or better. So I think that there is that synergy between different technologies, of
Mm.
course. But I often think that what you do, Neil, is something that makes other people line up or queue up because this is so important. So thank you for putting us in second and third line. But hey, no, tell us a bit more about the pilot. What was that like? Were you dead scared on the way?
Yeah, terrified. And I'm always terrified of one thing or another. Trying to scale a tech business is all new. I have to Google what do I do today to see what I'm meant to be as a CEO. So the pilots, we started with an MVP, a minimal viable product, with home care provider in Surrey, and that went really well. But we got learned tons of learnings out of that. So we then went to build something, and I think there's a whole separate set of stresses around how you develop your product and whether you do that in house or whether you go like we did outsource. And the cost now of getting tech, software is eating the world, and everyone, there are developers are commanding huge salaries, and it's really hard to get great people. So that was a challenge, and we I remember when I started, someone said, "Oh, you're going to do an app? Well, that'll cost you about 2 grand. Two guys in Lithuania will bang that out for you in a weekend." And I think like this year we've spent £750,000 just on the
Yeah,
dev salaries. So not anything else. So it just shows you that what is actually a very simple thing that we're doing, which is accelerating employee referrals, is a very simple concept, is a very simple process. There's so much behind the scenes. So the pilots, when we launched, we then got EU funding, and viewers should Google EU if they're not familiar with what that was. But we got some EU funding, and then that made us pilot in Cornwall. And Cornwall is probably one of the hardest places to recruit. If you are a provider in Cornwall, then like your recruitment hinterland is basically mostly sea on three sides of you. And there are many pressures there. So it's kind of it's a real test case for us, and we made many mistakes. And I'm very grateful to the very patient providers in Cornwall for letting us fall over, picking us back up again, and so on. What's interesting, if you pilot in public, which you have to do because it was all fine until we got a customer, then things get more complicated, is that you create a reputation. You have to make mistakes in public, and then people remember those mistakes, and so word of mouth is, "Oh, I don't think that works," but actually that was like years ago. And that's a very frustrating thing in tech, is that you kind of have to fail publicly. But we had our very first hire. I remember the day, in autumn of 2019, and the referrer and the referee are both still 3 years later in post, which is really gratifying. So it was a painful time, but you have to. That we learned so much. So piloting is essential, but we do need providers to be willing to pilot too, and to accept that this is not the finished article. And I think we could have done a better job of explaining that to them.
that's a brilliant point. I can reference that in so many ways, both starting up our whole business and piloting that with two customers, or at that time, partner organizations. And then later on, developing new features, wanting to get the feedback from end users, customers that see the value or do not see the value. And definitely with software, for the end user, you're no better than today. So if things aren't working, you're not working. And that's it's always a really quick verdict on you if things are not as you expect them to be. So I can see where you're coming from. But then tell us something about the successes also.
So yeah, I mean, we had many challenges, and not just those, but kind of scaling a business quickly. We grew 9 times last year, and that has there's pain associated with that, and and we had to recruit as well, and I found it really hard to recruit, and it was quite embarrassing considering I wrote a book about it. I thought, I can't tell anyone, but we're really struggling to recruit ourselves. But pretty much everybody came from referrals, so that did help us. In terms of successes, I think we've had an element of luck. Obviously, we don't want the workforce crisis that we've got, but this has presented a time when providers have now been shaken out of their habit of using internet job boards, which actually were never a really good source of staff. They don't stay very long, so you got volume that way, and it was kind of quite easy to use. So that's shaken everyone to think differently. So that's helped us. We also benefited from some government funding um, to try and support workforce and tech. So that's kind of lucky. I think that we're also, the concept is very simple to understand. So it's very easy to explain to people what this does. And most managers that you talk to, or owners of businesses, or HR directors, they already know that employee referrals are that, even if they haven't got data, they kind of know that's a really high quality source. So we've had a lot of, unfair advantages, I think. And we also, through my kind of modest awareness of me and the book, I could take our limited resources and put them into customer success and support instead of sales initially, and we've still carried on doing that. So our support team and success team are amazing, and there's enough of them to answer the phone. And I think that is something that many tech providers, you're more concentrating on the sale than you are on the service, but you need, on a recurring revenue business, for your customers to still love you tomorrow. And so I think that's something that we got right. And we also have, because the app recruits from people who are right for the job, not people already in the sector, we do a much better job than internet job boards of bringing new people into the sector. And that is a hot button now to grow capacity. It's all very well moving people around, but let's grow capacity. And so the app isn't the only thing that's better than the app is importing people from overseas, which has now got really hard. So I'm really pleased that it's doing that as well. And so then local authorities and central government are fans of the app, because we're doing something for the whole sector as well as each individual provider.
Tell us something more about just that, Neil. What is it that you do, just to explain it to me at least, to get people involved that perhaps do not know of social care before?
So yeah, the way, Skills for Care say that about every year, all of the new starters in social care, only 37% are actually not already a care worker. So you can say a positive is, well, we keep our skill base, our talent base. The negative is that we're not really growing capacity at all. And so we put more and more pressure on our existing staff, and people are churning from one provider to another. So you're gaining, one provider gains, the other one loses. It's a zero-sum game. And what you do if you put the recruitment challenge over to your care workers is they don't think like that. They don't actually often know that many care workers in their friends and family group. They think about people who have the right values for care. And so then they go and find those people, and they sell social care to them much more convincingly than a government campaign or an employer can do, because it's total trust. And so what they do is pick people that they already screen for, are you willing to work weekends? Are you local? Would you do the work? And so you get a much higher quality of person. And on the app as well, we have a bonus of points called the New to Care bonus. So you earn points throughout you reach out to a friend, you get a point or something, they inquire, you get a couple of points, and then successful interview, you get points. And then when they start work, if they're new to care, then you get a double bonus often of points. And so this is like reinforcing and encouraging care workers to think, hold on a minute, who out there needs to join the sector? So that's really the secret sauce of growing capacity.
Yeah, and you're making people refer others to come work with themselves and people like themselves, right? So
yeah, exactly right. We do also see that if you are referred in, if you came via a referral, you're far more likely to do that yourself. So it becomes like a snowball of more people come in, and they recruit that way as well. And so you see it kind of growing, because people might say, oh, well, my staff only know a couple of people and they've already recommended them. But it isn't like that. You can share on Facebook, that gets reshared with someone else. So it's people thinking, oh, no, you'd be good. And it goes to Morten to Sangha, and then off to someone else. And then, we're just kind of trying to clear the pipes to these invisible networks that each provider has into the community, they are so valuable, especially when not many people now are actually actively looking for a job. You have to go and find them now. It's a different world. And so that's what the app is doing.
And Neil, does your app also, capture the offboarding, for example, when people leave? Does it track whether, why they have left or how many of them left from that process?
Not yet. I mean, it's a really good point. Is what do we add to the app? As extra services. So the other part of recruiting we offer is a platform so that the provider can give bonus points for good behavior, can recognize long service. That helps retention and engagement. But we don't have anything at the other end of the process yet. But I think, as the app is taken on, those sorts of things might be added. What the challenge for us, and probably for every tech provider, is you end up with a roadmap that's stuffed full of things that are jostling with each other, and then all of those things you eventually put in order, and then bugs come in, and then none of them get done. It's the pressure of doing this, and also we started just by me and the team coming up with things we thought would work. You can't do that for too long. You have to use data, and we collect a lot of data. We just don't have time to look at it. So we need to become data led, because I've made mistakes, I've made assumptions, and they're wrong. And so it's a discipline.
No, absolutely. And your team was there with us for our first data cafe session where we were talking about recruitment, and it was really good to hear from Jane. And yeah, I think you're right there. Somewhere we need to be much more aware of data going forward, because the sector still quite at this point believes in anecdotes and
Mm.
doesn't layer the true hard data to really reflect upon whether my anecdotes are right, whether I need to change them now, given that things are moving ahead.
That was a really cool feature request, Sangha.
I
And Neil
know,
absolutely
I
loved it, and he
know.
put it all the way at the bottom of his backlog. I could hear
Yeah,
that.
I know, I love it. And I think, we the whole onboarding process is something that's quite broken, where candidates don't really hear much, and they drift away while DBS and references are happening. And
Mm.
we have a much longer onboarding process than Amazon, than Tesco, than anyone else. And so
Mm,
communication is really important, and engagement. And that's why we have seen real successes getting the app in the hands of people just as soon as they accept the job offer. They start referring even before day one.
mm,
So I mean, at some point in the future, we might, like, look at the whole life cycle of the care worker, and the app is a constant through that. And what
Yeah.
can
yeah.
we do to support, the whole retention, and why are people leaving? um, I think would be great to do. But for now, I think there's so much more we can do to optimize what we're doing. I mean, just one quick example is, if a candidate is delivered via the app from a member of staff recommending somebody, then you might find the recruiter is busy and they only call a couple of times, and then the person doesn't recognize their number, it doesn't pick up, and then they say, "Oh, I'm going to archive them." Well, actually, now what we're going to do is say, instead of them archiving them, we're going to send them back to the referrer and say, "Hey, why don't you have a go? They're your friend." And so you can optimize much more than we're doing, and I'm looking forward to doing that.
And another thing that I have observed often, and as part of our HR transformation work that we do, I often ask, have you recorded what is the preferred mode of communication for each of your candidates? Because we often assume that making a phone call is perhaps the easiest way, or sending an email, and then there's this whole land of text messaging, which the new generation are much more, I would say, prefers over other method, and that somehow drops in the mix.
I love that you say the new generation and text messaging in the same sentence. They want to be snapped, probably even not snapped or anything. I love that. Oh, good Saga.
Point about text messaging, we do see huge improvements in response rates with candidates using that method. And I think, to your point, Zanga, no one under 25 will knows how to dial up on a phone now. It's a much more accepted method. And email is a disaster if you're trying to engage people. Certainly, relying on it is a disaster. So those communication channels are so important. and we, you need to optimize all of that. If it's for Care Friends candidates or if it's for others from any other source, I think there's you need to give people a choice and also use different platforms. And texting is definitely the most successful in the recruitment world.
Brilliant. One thing, just before we finish off, you've already said stuff about technology in general in the workforce space. You've said something about things you like, things you think that have worked over the years. And with that in mind, what are your future plans, Neil? Do you have anything already now that you are going to prioritize for Care Friends going forward?
Well, we've got, the plans for Care Friends are many and various. I think we've got a whole piece around optimization. So we talked about trying to improve and get the most out of what we've got. And then we've had inquiries from, say, the NHS and other related sectors. So we may look at applying Care Friends in other sectors. We're already in Australia, so there's been a geographical expansion. And we're looking at Germany and other markets. So the app, the core focus will be to get the most out of what we're doing and to become the best we can do, whether that's the best at referrals and also adding maybe onboarding, or as you say, Sangha, offboarding to support the offer, and then looking at how it can support other related markets, particularly say the NHS, where there's equivalent pressures. But I mean, obviously social care is very close to my heart, so we will continue to focus on that market. And we learn a lot by being in other countries, so we've learned a lot from the Australian launch, and we benefit from having that geographical exposure. So we'll just carry on doing those sorts of things, I think.
That's really awesome. I would love to have you in India at some point, Neil. Honestly,
It's on the feature list. Yeah, from our last conversation, Sangha, we will have to look at that. And I think just a word, about like how to fund all of this, because I think tech companies who are growing have a choice at some point. Do you take professional funds, venture capital funds, and there are some in the sector that do that, or do you try and grow without that? And my personal thing, the thing for us is that we would not take that kind of funding. We will try and grow organically, and that means a bit slower but a little bit less frantic. But you have this choice at some point, and I think the funding options for social care tech, we need more of them, but that becomes a choice that people have to make too, about whether they're going to shoot for the moon or take a different path.
That's some brilliant piece of advice. Neil Eastwood, thank you very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure hearing about Care Friends and your startup story.
Thank you very much, guys, and lovely to chat.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share your favorite Take Care podcast with your friends and colleagues. Until we meet next week, take care.